Lovely to see you, Mel and Nan and Dawn and Deb and Valerie and Jean, Martin, Vandy, Joni. I love seeing all these people. This is great. We have a wonderful webinar for you guys tonight. It's a big one. We had about 240 register. We expect about 80 of y'all to show up. Where did I get y'all? I've been hanging around Melissa a little too long. I'd like you all to please move your mouse if you wouldn't mind. Go to the bottom of your screen. You're going to see the green share screen button. Please go to the left of that. It's the chat box. And I'd love you, please type in your name and where you're from. And this makes sure that all of you are used to using the chat box. Hi, all. Thank you, Reed, for signing in. But if all of you can sign in, this is wonderful. We've got people from South Carolina, from Tampa, Jean from New Jersey. We've got people from California, Atlanta, from San Diego, Texas, Rosemont, Illinois. Oh my gosh, Scottsdale, Arizona, all over. We want you to ask questions. We put this webinar together. We had a little bit, I have to be honest with you, a little bit of a confusion. This was SCW's fault. And we were very pleased that Melissa Lane, who is from University of North Georgia, she's a professor of kinesiology. She wrote our nutrition coaching for certification for SCW and nutrition, hormones, and metabolism certification also for SCW. That she's going to be presenting at our nutrition summit that's coming up this weekend. So very cool. We also are welcoming Fabio Camano, who has to scoot off early, no fault of his own. This is all our error, but he's wonderful and he's consented to join us for the first half. He's a faculty member at San Diego State University and NASM, and he's a medical advisor, board member, and scientific advisor for Orange Theory and Core Health and Fitness. And he helps plan FEA in Asia. He's a wonderful presenter, and he also wrote our corrective exercise certification and has worked extensively with our personal training cert. So we welcome Fabio. Thank you for joining us. We have Alex Bryce that a lot of you don't know if you've come to live conferences. I met Alex and he's turned into an incredible asset to SCW and a very generous one as well. He's actually the training coach for my son who ended up going to the Olympics in Brazil, believe it or not. And he also trained me and he's amazing. He's got his master's degree in exercise science and he's currently pursuing a doctorate in physical therapy. And he owns his own facility. Amazing, amazing guy. And I'm really excited to have Reed Davis, who's a board certified holistic health practitioner and a certified nutritional therapist. And he's an expert in functional lab testing and holistic lifestyle medicine. And what's really cool is he has a very unique certification. He's the founder of the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition certification course. He's certified over 3,000 people in 50 different countries. And this is very, very interesting. And we're really excited to welcome Reed here. And of course, we have the fabulous Adam Buddha-Cavalli, who is herding us cats and keeping us in line for this webinar. So we're going to jump right in. And I'm just going to, I'm going to bombard Fabio and annoy him as much as I can. What is metabolism?
Well, we can break it down to a very simple definition. It's simply the sum of every chemical reaction that is taking place in your body at any given time. The combination of reactions that are building things up, which we call anabolic, and combination of things that at the same time might be breaking things down, what we call catabolic. Now, collectively, all that energy that it represents is about 60 to 75% of all the calories you burn in a day. So that would be a quick way to kind of explain it.
And that's great. It's very thorough, very simple. I think I can understand this. And how does what you eat affect your metabolism? Fabio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, first of all, in that postprandial state, so once you've just eaten a meal, in that ensuing 40 to 60 minutes, you will see a little elevation in your metabolic rate, because there is an energy cost to chew food, to swallow food, to digest, absorb food, and then to store it in whatever form. Now, interesting has been studies that have looked at eating 3 meals a day versus eating, say, 5 or 6 meals a day. And if they represent the same number of calories, in other words, they're isocaloric diets, it really doesn't make much of a difference. At the end of the day, the total calories needed to kind of perform all those actions, we call it the thermic effect of food, is about the same. So whether you choose to eat 3 meals a day, 2 meals a day, 5 meals a day, from a metabolic standpoint, it doesn't make much difference. But from other standpoints, there are definitely big differences in terms of the frequency of your feeding.
Interesting. And I saw you nodding, Alex. Please share with us.
Yeah, I think Fabio did a excuse me, great job of providing a very succinct summary there. Overall, if we're looking at when people talk metabolism in the fitness industry at large, what they're typically talking about, right, is in the realm of metabolic rate, or wanting to lose weight, or understanding those concepts of energy balance. And there's so much misunderstanding and misconceptions in terms of stoking your metabolic fire with nutrient timing, or people really losing sleep over that. And from a performance standpoint, if we're examining someone like an Olympic athlete, we could say that meal timing matters a lot. But for the average person, or if weight loss or healthy metabolism, even though I don't really love that term, if that's really more of the main focus, then your total calorie expenditure and consumption is what matters much more than 6, 10 meals, et cetera, or how frequently you're feeding.
And Reed, you have a very unique perspective that if we're talking about metabolic individuality, I was fascinated by what you shared before we turned the camera on about how do we, is it important to do a DNA test? Is it important to individualize our analysis of the body?
I think genetics are important, but I don't run a test on every person. And my sort of claim to fame is I've run thousands of labs on thousands of people, but the DNA test isn't necessarily one of them. But I do want to bring it from such a broad view of, the total sum of all chemical activities in your body. And yeah, there's catabolism and anabolism. One breaks the body down, one builds it up. So I might want to zero down into one area of that, either, what's the correct fuel mixture for each person to produce the energy, or what hormones are in place. Or, if you're eating really good food to produce energy and build your body up, are you breaking it down? Are you digesting it, absorbing it? And then what's happening to all of the waste products? There's the idea of detoxification. There's so many things going on. So metabolism would include the hormones, the immune system, digestion, detoxification, energy production, balancing the nervous system. There's so many things in play. And so it's hard to talk to, let's say, a client about this big, metabolism is this really broad thing. It is. But we got to sort of narrow it down sometimes. So the hormones in control of catabolism, for instance, that would be your stress hormones. Cortisol breaks the body down. So what's the counterbalancing hormone to cortisol? It's DHEA. That's very anabolic, and it builds the body up. So I think for practical purposes, we might want to break it down, and wherever you want to go with that's fine. Hormones, or what food would provide energy, and those kind of things. But this is the first time I've gotten together with this group. I'm fascinated with SCW. I think it sounds like an amazing group of folks. And I was a personal trainer once.
Yeah, it's we are unique. 70% of us are group fitness instructor, 74%, 60% are personal trainers, and 27% are owners, managers, and directors. And it's interesting because of this pandemic, we've seen a lot of entrepreneurs come out of this. Melissa, you tend, I kind of think of you as the hormone expert. I know but Melissa's being very kind. She's just getting over being sick, or is in the throes of being sick, and is generously supporting us and donating her time. Can you share with us how you see hormones affecting metabolism?
I would have,
Yeah, 5 minutes or less, right?
no, I'm kind of like Alex. You have to pull things out of me. Am a firm believer that hormones are just as important as what you eat. We live in a world where if a little bit of HIIT training 2 to 3 times a week is good, then HIIT training every day is better. And that's going to put us into overtraining, and that's going to stimulate our cortisol, and that's going to keep us up at night, and that's going to lower our testosterone. And there's just so many things that come into play when we look at, the thyroid and the anterior pituitary, which controls your thyroid. And if we're not sleeping and we're not making good choices in the rest of our life, we might as well be ruining ourselves with the food we eat. That's just the way I look at it. Hormones are that important.
That's a really good perspective, if I could jump in. I love talking about the hormones. And it's also a good example of metabolism, because there are kind of master hormones, and they are produced through metabolic processes, and they break down into their children and grandchildren, so to speak, through metabolic processes. If you take pregnenolone, for instance, considered a grandfather hormone, it metabolizes, it changes catabolically, chemically, it's with enzymes. And by the way, that is regulated by genes, genetic expression, into its sort of branches. And so that's just an example of metabolism. How does DHEA turn into both estrogen and testosterone? Metabolic processes, different enzymes, different genes. And so we're looking at metabolism live in action right there.
Fabio, you cited a very interesting study, speaking of genetics, about the twin study that was I guess it was through Cambridge and Harvard.
Actually, it's called PREDICT study that was initiated in 2019, conducted a collaboration between King's College in London and Harvard. And they were trying to explore, this whole idea of, if we want to call it metabolic individuality, in terms of how much of an impact do our genes really have on how the body reacts to food, right? And what they did in the study is they took 700 pairs of identical twins. Good luck finding that many numbers, but nonetheless, they had that many numbers. And they gave them a variety of different foods, and they were simply measuring all these biometric markers. And what was interesting is that they found that even though these were identical twins, they had very diverse reactions to ingestion of food. I mean, we're talking about blood sugar responses, insulin responses, blood triglyceride responses, things of that nature. So really what it comes down to is this idea that even with people that are genetically identical, the impact of food on your body is going to be tremendously different. We are all individuals, and there is no one size fits all. And that's why we say there's never one diet that's a perfect diet for everyone. We could take the 6 of us and put us onto, or the 5 of us and put us onto the exact same diet, and we'd all react very differently to it, some positively, some negatively. And I think it comes down to, it's just this complex kind of, matrix within our body that's not just physiology, but it's chemistry, it's biology, it's everything that plays together. And, maybe at one point down the road, we'll figure things out, but today we're not even near. And I think what it's going to come down to is finding the foods and the diet that works best for you. And what's best for you is not necessarily best for your client either. I think it's important that our practitioners all know that.
And I see Melissa nodding. So obviously you agree.
I'm going to take it back to a little bit of an application standpoint. Coming from, my first love was group fitness, which is how I initially stumbled into SCW, substituting for someone. And so many times in the group fitness world, we hear people say, because of the thermic effect of food, you need to eat more often to raise your metabolism. And we have turned this country into a bunch of grazers. People don't know what it feels like to be hungry anymore. People don't understand why their stomach growls, and people don't understand that the thermic effect of food, like Fabio was talking about, is actually a % of calories. There's a percent for carbs, percent for fat, and a percent for protein. And think back to your math days. What does percent mean? It means part of a whole. So if my whole day is 2,000 calories, it doesn't matter whether I had 500 calories 4 times or 300 calories 6.5 times. Percent means part of a whole. So we need to go back and listen to our body for signs and signals that are coming from our hypothalamus that is saying, you need to eat, you don't need to eat, you need to drink, you need to calm down, you need to go for a walk, you need to make some serotonin.
And Alex, you're doing a presentation on fasting, which the intermittent fasting. And I know it's not one of the questions that we're talking about, but when I think, we've trained ourselves almost never to feel hunger. Remember when it was just grazing, eating constantly, little bits constantly. I can't do that. It's sad. I kind of wait until I'm starving and then I got to run away from the computer and hopefully have something healthy that's waiting for me. But what are some of the things you've looked at in examining fasting?
Well, to go back to some of the big picture concepts regarding fasting or any other diet that Fabio and Melissa have already sort of touched on, when calories are matched and when protein is matched, we really don't see any diet coming out as inherently superior, right? They're just manipulating how you are consuming calories in different ways. Something like a ketogenic diet is going to be removing a macronutrient. So we're restricting feeding by eliminating a large number of foods that you can eat. With time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, whatever terminology you want to use, it's just a specific window of when you can and cannot consume calories. So a diet, just like a training program, is only as good as its adherence. We've talked about you need to figure out what's going to work for you. What you can stick to and what fits within your lifestyle is the biggest thing that I can give in terms of a recommendation for an individual, because we do know that with the twin cohort being an excellent example, we know that there is metabolic differences from person to person. What can I do about it right now as a strength coach or as a nutrition coach? Very little. Let's check back on that in maybe 10 or 20 years and it may be an extremely different story. But for now, the best thing that I can do is recommend that someone finds what works for their lifestyle and sleep.
Sarah,
because nothing else matters if you're not sleeping. And we can talk about all of the different hormonal concepts or leptin and ghrelin issues with satiety or hunger responses, cravings, et cetera. And all of that is way, way worse and much more challenging when we're not sleeping. If you don't sleep, literally nothing else matters. We could have the best program in the world on paper. We could have the best diet in the world on paper, but you're going to see a change in your metabolism and you're going to see an increase in hunger and calorie consumption from a poor night's sleep. Nothing else matters if we aren't sleeping. And that's something that I talk about regardless of what the exact topic is on the presentation or webinar or what have you.
Hey, Sarah,
Yeah.
if I can just piggyback on what Alex said, talking about timing. Now with athletes, there is volumes of research supporting the timing of nutrients, all right? Protein, carbohydrates, fluid. But when it comes to the average person, what's been interesting in looking at some of the studies on intermittent fasting is our circadian rhythms. And one in particular, I think that we should be kind of starting to kind of keep a watchful eye on is insulin. The human body generally has greater sensitivity to insulin in the early part of the day than it does in the latter part of the day. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I gave you 10 grams of sugar, 10 grams of glucose, right? Not sugar, just glucose. And I gave it to you at, say, 9 o'clock in the morning versus, say, giving it to you at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You would actually need more insulin to process, and I'm using the word process very liberally here, but you'd actually need more insulin to process that 10 grams in the latter part of the day than you would in the earlier part of the day. That in itself poses problems because one of the things that we know about insulin is that when you have higher levels of circulating insulin in your blood, it actually, as much as it's wonderful for muscle protein stopping muscle protein degradation, others it stops muscle protein breakdown, it also inhibits fat metabolism. Sorry, my phone is picking up things. So it's just interesting. So with fasting, I think there's going to be very interesting in terms of, are we early morning fasted or, early morning fed? I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting as the research of intermittent fasting continues, as to we know what it typically means, because fasting is really just a timing rather than a macronutrient composition. But it'd be interesting to see where the research goes now with all the circadian rhythms and insulin sensitivity, and how, like cortisol too, it fluctuates through the day. And so timing our nutrition with our hormones might be something to keep an eye on in the future.
Is that also individual as to how the body will react?
Yep. So
Or
some
are
people
there
say
some
early birds and the kind of, you know, so the person who maybe likes to sleep in might see their insulin sensitivity increase a little later in the day, but it's not going to be in the afternoon. It might just be a few hours. It might still be mid-morning as opposed to early morning, but there is that pathway, but it will have a little bit of fluctuation from person to person.
do we have any recommendations as to, do we eat more protein in the morning because it will help fuel us during the day, or possibly more carbohydrates? Reed.
I'd like to speak on that. And again, I know everyone hates this answer, but it depends on the person. I think for a trainer, just like anyone is in nutrition or trying to provide some advice, and actually this might apply to any protocol, the bane of the nutritional practice is that the person with condition A, they come in and whatever their condition is, and you might apply a protocol, let's say a diet that worked for you. And they might go, wow, I love that diet. Now, so you feel pretty good. The next person comes in and they got maybe even the same problem. And you say, well, here, this is our protocol, you know, and they get no results. And you're kind of scratching your head. And then another person comes in and you try the same problem. You try it again and they get worse on this. So, picking a diet, even, typical paleo or something like that. When I started in the business a long time ago, it was the Atkins diet was really popular. And it was the same kind of a thing, eat more protein and all that. So certain people do well, certain people it makes no improvement. Certain people is going to make them feel worse, as people did on Atkins. They felt like crap. So the question is why? There's absolutely no intrinsic value to food. It's the variable is the person, and it depends on some very distinct characteristics. Now, Melissa alluded to it. She talked about reading reactions from the pituitary, meaning, hormonal. And I think she was probably referring to thyroid, which is the regulator of your metabolism. But all of it begins with fueling each cell. And there are true protein types. There are true carb types. It's just genetically bred in the bone. And I could talk about where that comes from. But it isn't that hard to figure out. And finally, I totally agree with Alex. The idea of sleep is so critical. And I noticed a comment in the chat group about that. And I'll just mention that our protocol at FDN land is DRESS. So it is diet. And it has to be metabolically typed minus your food sensitivities. R stands for rest, of course, sleep patterns, circadian rhythm issues. The E is the big E, exercise. And the two S's are stress reduction. You've probably heard that word, Sarah, stress. Have you heard that before? And then, of course, supplementation would be the last one. And when it comes to this idea of eating, the D is the big epigenetic factor. And if it isn't metabolically typed, then you're going to pay the piper. It is genetically based on, what your ancestors were doing 25,000 years ago, about 500 generations back, to find your paleo diet. And I can tell you exactly how that works, how energy is produced through the oxidation. There's an oxidation rate. You better get the protein, fat, and carb, the macronutrient ratios right. And then you also better get the nervous system balance that comes from that, right? Those are the two dominating factors when it comes to diet, your oxidative rate and your autonomic nervous system, and keeping that in balance. And then finally, what Melissa said, something to do with your hormone type, the endocrine system. There are endocrine types. And finally, the signs I look for and that we can use to gauge whether you got their diet right for a person is, number one, energy production and energy. And every meal should give you a lot of really good energy, at least enough to get through, to do some work or have some fun, to get through to the next fuel stop or meal. So I agree with a lot that's been said here about intermittency and eat so many calories 5 times a day or just 3 times a day. But your meal should give you really good energy from the time you ate it till the time you have to refuel the tank.
So I'll
just give you, say again.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to give you the 2 more ways you know if you're eating right. So besides energy production, a sense of satisfaction. You should be completely satiated by that meal. If you're craving something an hour later or 2 hours later, there's a reason for that, and it's you didn't eat the right fuel mixture. You didn't eat the right foods, because it's not satisfying. It's not satiating. It's a really critical concept. And lastly would be a sense of well-being. Believe it or not, we're designed perfectly to be fairly happy, unless someone cut you off in traffic or punch you in the nose or yell at you or something. If you're cranky for no reason, the first place to look is back at what you had for breakfast or the last meal. So satiation, sense of well-being, and energy production are the true indicators of whether that food's right for you, that meal, and the combination of foods you ate. And
so we're getting some questions. It's pretty interesting in the chat. Alex, I'm going to shoot over to Alex for this. And I'm going to let you answer Judith, because Judith talked about melatonin. Will it help with sleep? How much is effective? Do you have any recommendations? And Fabio, trust me, I'm going to get to you. I see your head shake.
I got to leave in 3 minutes.
You got to leave. All right. I'm going to let Fabio go first. Okay.
No, actually, I want to go back to your original question, if I can. You asked about what should be our protein feedings. An interesting review of literature was just done last year by Brad Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon, and they were talking about timing of protein feeding. And we've actually started to come to this understanding that when they did a meta-analysis of all the research out there, that there is actually a dosing that is about 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that's about 0.18 grams per pound of body weight. And it should be fed at minimum of 4 times through the day, because we notice that your body undulates between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown.
Fabio, if somebody weighed 100 pounds, because I figure that'll be easy.
Yeah, multiply that by 0.18.
0.18, what?
That'll be 18 grams.
18 grams, okay, of a combination of protein, fat,
obviously we'd want quality protein sources, and that's a whole separate conversation. Right, but it should be done at least 4 times through the day. This is what we're finding, because the body goes through these undulations. And so generally after about every 3 hours to 4 hours, the body goes back into muscle protein breakdown. So that would be one area. To your first question, you said how much protein should we be feeding, when should we be eating protein? That's just a simple guideline to follow. Now, for some people that's enough. For some people they might need to add a 5th or a 6th feeding. But I'm going to end on that one. I'll let Alex handle the question on the melatonin and the pineal gland and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I have to depart. So thank you all for your time, and be well, all of you.
Fabio, thank you so much. You're so kind to join us. He had a pre-existing commitment, and it was our error at SCW with the scheduling. So thank you. And he'll also be at Midwest Mania, and I think you're in
the Saturday.
Yeah, on Saturday at the Nutrition Summit. Thank you, Fabio.
Bye-bye.
So, Alex, I'm going to take it away.
Sure. So to piggyback just very quickly off of what Fabio had mentioned there, that is an excellent review by Brad Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon. It is open access. So if you're interested in looking more into that publication, if you just search Schoenfeld and Aragon, you'll be able to find it.
And then Schoenfeld, I'm going to ask Adam to look it up for us. Schoenfeld, Shonefeld.
Oenfeld. Yeah, Brad is considered the world's foremost researcher on muscle hypertrophy, and Alan is a longtime diet researcher. He was one of the first to do a monthly review. So both good resources there. In terms of melatonin, of course, I'm not a medical professional, right? So we have to sort of take this with a grain of sand. And there are, of course, like we've talked about, Reed and Melissa have both made a good reference to this, that there's always going to be an individual dose response, right? You give 100 people the same supplement, the same program, the same diet, they're all going to respond differently. So melatonin can be a useful supplementation if someone is consistently struggling with sleep, and it is available over the counter. But Even for myself personally, I don't take melatonin. My sleep quality is pretty good. I notice a lot of drowsiness the next day if and when I do. Timing and dosage there can be important. Typically, as I understand it, most of the available over-the-counter supplements for melatonin are overdosed. And most people tend to take them too late in the day, where it's because it's a diurnal hormone that's going to have a systemic response. We can't just like take it 10 minutes before going to bed and then assume you're just going to conk out, right? Typically, it's orders of hours prior. And I believe, and if Melissa or Reed wants to chime in on this, I believe that a 2.5 to 5 milligram dose is really all that's necessary, as opposed to some of the supplements being considerably higher than that. I see someone asking a question about Doc Parsley sleep remedy pills. I've never heard of them, so
I know
can't-
Dr. Parsley. He's really a good guy, and I answered in there. He developed that for PTSD clients. He specializes in working with vets, especially Navy SEALs and that, which he used to be one. So he's it's a good product. But the answer generally, I agree with Alex, and I think, listen, it's not going to be in a bottle. It's a combination of all your lifestyle and your environment. So your environment and your lifestyle are the only things you really have control over. And most of us for environment are kind of stuck. We're talking about having our butts nailed to these seats that we're in all the time before you guys came on. But Alex, you couldn't be more right about melatonin. It's a natural hormone. It's actually largely made in the gut. So we look at really low melatonin levels as a finger pointing at, hey, let's look at the gut, because your baseline level should be much higher than it is. The little bit you get from the pineal gland in the brain at night is only just enough to make you a little bit sleepy when it gets dark. It is part of the circadian rhythm. So I don't supplement with it either, Alex. I get that dopey feeling, like I don't really need it, and if it makes you groggy, you're taking too much. And there's two types, by the way. One should make you sleepy. The other, they have a time release one, I think from Douglas Labs, this is only for people with really extreme conditions that we need to just sort of break the habit. You might be better off just putting bright daylight in your face as soon as you get up in the morning. That's what pilots use when pilots do these 20-hour flights around the globe. They don't know where the hell they are. They're going to use more like light therapy to restore their circadian rhythm back to where they were. And we know that shift workers, night workers, have all kinds of hormonal problems, and they're just fighting nature. We are diurnal, as Alex said, and you fight that, you're going to pay the piper. You fight anything that's genetically programmed into your bones, and you're going to pay the piper. And so natural health is a study of that.
And if we're looking, I'm going to ask another question, Melissa. I'm going to start with you. Is how is metabolism affected by age?
Massively. And if you want to know more, you have to come Friday all day long with me. Again, I'm the hormone person, and so many hormones start to change as we get older. Once we go through menopause, if you don't understand what happens to your estrogen and your progesterone and your testosterone, and then we've started sarcopenia, we have to worry about DHEA, which is termed the fountain of youth hormone for a reason. And we become less active, especially lifting weights. So now we're changing some with IGF and growth hormone and testosterone. We're not sleeping as well. Somebody said they even still toss and turn. And think about it, once we go through menopause, we now might have kids that are out on their own that are causing us to toss and turn all night. And we also might be going through midlife crisis because it happens with the hormones, tend and befriend, and you don't have play dates anymore. And we also have to worry about aging parents. So we're stressed with them. So there are just so many things that run the gamut. A lot of time we turn to alcohol right before we go to sleep, which is one of the worst things you can do to keep your sleep constant throughout the night. So aging has so much to do with it. I could talk forever on that.
Okay.
Probably as the senior citizen here, I could speak a little bit about it and tell you that it is work, but I've studied anti-aging. There's a book called The 120-Year Diet by a guy named Wolford. He was the nutrition.
How do you spell his last name?
Wolford. Roy, it's Roy Wolford, 120-Year Diet. Now he's an MD, teaches at USC or UCSD. He's was in charge of the nutrition for the biosphere experiments 1 and 2. He studied longevity, and I totally bought into that 20 years ago and have been restricting calories, at least to some extent. But he says, instead of going up to about 50 and going down, we all know that, hey, 50, you're over the hill, you go up and then you go down. His claim was that you should, you'll age till about 40. Now, my age, closer to 70 than 60, wouldn't like to just be 40 for a long freaking time, right? So you should really stay about 40, and I'll take 40 any day of the week. A healthy 40, give me that. So stay 40 till you're about 80 plus. Then you're going to go downhill no matter what. Your cells are programmed to die, and telomeres do shorten no matter what you do. So you're going to die. No one gets out alive. But hell, it would be really nice to be 40 until you're 80. And I'm working on it.
I think we're all working on it. Alex, how do you see metabolism affected by age?
Well, I think Melissa and Reed have both done a great job of showing that, yes, we have significant impacts as aging occurs. And this is still a very much emerging field of research. Someone had just asked what improves telomeres. And that's in many ways what aging researchers look at as the holy grail, because if we can maintain telomere length as opposed to losing telomere sequencing from cell division, then that would essentially, in a lot of ways, almost promote immortality, dare I say it. That's a little outside of the scope of metabolism or hormones, right? That's something where we're really looking at a specific cellular process. But what can we do from an anti-aging standpoint and to aid not just our metabolism, but sarcopenia, hormonal profiles, bone mineral density, cognoprotective effects, all of those different things. And to me, strength training.
I know what you're going to say.
Biggest thing that I
know what
do
you're going to say.
outside of getting somebody to sleep, right? Those are really the two best medicines that you can give your body.
And you always are a huge advocate of strength training.
Yes, I am. And there is no pill or prescription that can possibly compare to the benefits that occur from loading your body and getting strong. Strong people are harder to kill, and they are more useful in general, right? So the more that we can do to supplement all of these healthy lifestyle choices that we're talking about in terms of sleep quality, sleep hygiene, hormonal regulation, et cetera, picking up a barbell and getting strong is one of the largest portions of that, again, outside of sleep, because if you're not sleeping, there's nothing I can do strength training wise, right? But from an anti-aging perspective, it is a tremendous benefit, and you are never too late to start, never.
And I love that. It's a natural way to boost your metabolism. And Melissa, you were between the coughs, you were smiling. Please contribute.
I think, again, I'm going to bring it back to application and what I see. The hot thing these days tends to be boot camp type workouts, especially since COVID, because we can do them outside and we can do them with our body weight. And I think when George has been open forever, we're back in, we're lifting weights. That's all good. But when the rest of the world opens back up, we have to go back in and we have to realize that there is a big difference between doing 20 burpees every day with your body weight versus going into the gym and saying, yesterday I bench pressed this much, today I'm going to bench press that much. We have to do progressive resistance training. And the older women get, they're like, how many calories did I burn? How many calories did I burn? And they're not looking at the big picture that we have lost our estrogen, which plays a major role in osteoblast and osteoclast, and we're not building bones. So just like Alex said, osteoporosis and lifting weights. We have to go in and quit thinking that burpees are the end all to be all. Pick up some heavy dumbbells. Sorry.
No, I hear you. And what I find is people are listening, which is really exciting. We are always at the end of our each of our conferences, we ask our attendees, what do you want to hear more of? What sessions do you feel are important, that you want to see more of? Number one ended up being active aging. It really has risen, I think, also as the population's gotten older and as our clients have gotten older. And then nutrition is always important in there. Do you know what ended up being number three? Strength training. It surpassed functional training, which I thought was very interesting. And I think it's also because, things are opening up. And it surpassed personal training. So we're actually doing a functional training conference in August that we're just about to launch. I think we're launching it actually, to be honest with you, probably tomorrow. But it's really interesting. It's focused on strength, lifting kettle weights, lifting, using machinery, using bands, using to increase your body weight and increase the resistance. So I saw you nodding, Alex. Alex, this sounds kind of petty, but are there specific exercises? Do we focus on larger muscle groups? And is there a time? Do we eat before we work out? Do we eat after we work out? How is that also going to affect our metabolism? I know it's individual. Don't even throw that back at me.
Yes,
okay.
It is individual. But if we're looking at, how do we fuel for a training session, then there are some general rules of thumb that we can look to follow. You could recommend, a couple hundred calories with, a decent breakdown of carbs, fats, and protein prior to training. After strength training is when we're at our greatest insulin sensitivity and GLUT4 upregulation. So consuming protein and carbs after training is a good idea. But the idea of the anabolic window, you don't have to go sprint and chug your protein shake 30 seconds after your training session. That window stays open far longer than most people think. And muscle protein synthesis rates don't return to baseline until about 48 hours after a training session. So we have a lot of wiggle room. We're talking about basically a 6-hour window pre, intra, or post training fueling where we don't have to absolutely get into a paralysis by analysis type of mindset. But of course, we're built out of protein, right? And strength training itself, even though it promotes anabolism, is a catabolic event during the actual training. So the more we can do to provide carbs and protein after the fact is going to be a good idea. If we're looking at training over the long term and as it relates to our metabolism, muscle is a metabolically active tissue. So when you have more muscle mass, you are going to burn more calories at rest. It is not as large an effect as most people think. It's roughly 15 calories per pound of muscle. Let's also clear up another myth. People love to say muscle weighs more than fat. They weigh the same. A pound is a pound. We're talking about gravity, folks. It is more dense than fat. So it is going to take up less space relative to being a pound. But the more muscular we can be, the better off we're going to be in most cases. Strength is always functional. Somebody just mentioned arthritis. Strength training is beneficial for arthritis. I don't want to go too much more into it than that, but should not preclude you from picking up weights.
Okay, great. Melissa, I'm going to go to you and read. I'm going to hit on you real quickly afterwards.
Want to say one real quick thing about the benefits to raising your metabolism. To piggyback off of Alex, you actually have a protein in your body called albumin, and albumin is the protein that actually carries your fat from your chest to your legs, if that's where your legs are oxidizing fat during your cycle workout. And albumin actually enters the muscle through the plasma lemma on the outside of the muscle cell. So the bigger your muscle cells are, the more plasma lemma you have. So the more albumin you can put into the muscle. If you have a teeny tiny little muscle because you're using 5-pound weights, your albumin will back up with fatty acids, kind of like your Macy's truck backs up to the door of Macy's when you don't have a loading dock. You need a loading dock. Lift weights.
Lift weights. And Reed?
There's no question strength training is really important. You know, I'm a guy that with a very well-used body that would often lean towards just flexibility and these kind of things. Balance is really incredibly important. And so I'm with Alex, yet I hope he wouldn't work me out the exact same way he did the next guy. You know, it needs to be tailored. And I know he's acknowledging that. And when that question about telomeres, so I thought was pretty important, this idea of anti-aging. And yes, strength training is good, but the older you get, it's more about can you, you know, the flexibility as well as the strength. And we have to talk about oxidative stress, because the creation of you know, reactive oxygen species and nitrogen oxygen species, you know, what are commonly called you know, free radicals, they will break you down, starting with your arteries and creating high blood pressure and stress on all your organs and things like that, including the telomeres. So oxidative stress is going to teach, you know, there's pro-oxidation and anti-oxidation. A lot of that anti comes from the diet, of course. What you eat is critical, but you can extend your telomeres by keeping everything in balance. And so I think like my final words on just pursuit of any of these things, health stuff, it's about balance and resiliency. Especially again, the older you get, it's like you want to be balanced and resilient. That's what health is. Everything in your body has been given its innate intelligence. Every cell knows what its job is. You don't have to teach it. You just have to fuel it right and don't beat the crap out of it. And so, you know, not too badly, right, Alex?
I just want to end the webinar with that. Fuel it and don't beat the crap out of it.
There you go. That's words of wisdom.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. All right, guys, I'm going to end this webinar as usual. I feel kind of guilty. I'm always going a little bit over. We have a wonderful nutrition summit that's coming up this weekend. I hope you guys can join us. I'm going to show you a quick video here. Wonderful. And then we have a marvelous convention. This is our Nutrition Coaching Summit. It's nutritioncoachingsummit.com. And then we have an Active Aging Summit in July coming up in about 4 weeks. So I want to thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Reed. Wonderful to meet you and get to have you present. I can't wait to go to your sessions on Saturday.
Thank you.
Alex, you're a doll for joining us. Melissa, we love you, and please feel better. And thank you for joining us tonight. And Adam, thank you for running the webinar and running around like crazy this afternoon. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming SCW Summit.